Everybody wants to see into the future, whether it's to find out whether or not we should take a certain job, figure out what's going to happen with a particular relationship, or maybe we just want to know if it's going to rain on Sunday. But despite all this interest in forecasting, most actual forecasts aren't very good. And moreover, they're also not very well analyzed. In the new book, Super Forecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction, Wharton professor Philip Tetlock looks into what makes people good forecasters and suggests how you can incorporate some of those techniques into your own life. Philip, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Now, thanks to people like Tom Friedman and Nate Silver, and I think also maybe to the rise of big data, there seems to be a lot of interest in forecasting. So I was really surprised to learn from your book that despite all this interest in forecasting and maybe interest in people who have fashioned themselves as forecasters, forecasting itself's not very well studied. It's not very well analyzed at all.
I think that's fair to say, and it's pretty threatening to keep score of your forecasting accuracy. Imagine you're a big shot pundit. What incentive would you have to submit to a forecasting tournament in which you had to play on a level playing field against ordinary human beings? And the answer is not much, because the best possible outcome you could obtain is to tie it. You're expected to win, so the best outcome is a tie. And there's a good chance, our research suggests, that you're not going to win.
Now, the book was actually decades in the making. I mean, your research into this has stretched back for years, and you actually start the book, and in some ways this all started with a dart-throwing chimp. Could you tell us a little bit about that story? And I know you said in the book that people didn't exactly get the right takeaways out of that study, but I thought it was interesting to sort of show what happens when we try and test forecasting.
Sure. Well, in our early work, which I'm going to reveal how old I am, goes back into the mid-1980s, we did use the metaphor of the dart-throwing chimp to capture the idea, a baseline for performance, which is how much better can you do than chance. If you had a system that was just generating forecasts by chance, how well would you do relative to that? And that actually is a baseline that some people can't beat. Now, they can't beat it for a lot of reasons. Sometimes the environment is just hopelessly difficult, right? So if you were trying to bet on a roulette wheel in Las Vegas, you're not going to be able to do any better than a dart-throwing chimp. But people sometimes fail to beat the dart-throwing chimp even in environments where there are predictable regularities that could be picked up if you were being astute enough.
Now, in the book, you point out that a lot of people took away from that study that all predictions are bad, that forecasting is bad. But in fact, what you were pointing out really is that there's actually limits on predictability, that it's not all bad, it's just that there are limits on it.
That's right. You don't want to be too hard on people, because some environments really are. There's a lot of irreducible uncertainty in some environments. It's very difficult to bring it down below a certain point. So it's unfair to portray people as being dumb in some sense if they're failing to do something that's impossible. Of course, we don't know what's impossible until we try in earnest. So you don't discover what we call it the optimal forecasting frontier. You don't discover how good it's possible to become in a particular forecasting environment until you run forecasting tournaments, competitive tournaments, you plug in your best techniques for maximizing accuracy, and you see how good you can get. And that's essentially what we did in the forecasting tournaments with the U.S. government, the one sponsored by the intelligence community, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency. These are forecasting tournaments that were run between 2011 and 2015, involving tens of thousands of forecasters, trying to predict about 500 questions posed by the intelligence community over that period of time. And we found that some people could do quite a bit better than the dart-throwing chimp, and they could beat some more demanding baselines as well.
Now, one of the interesting things in the book is, you talk a little bit about where you found these forecasters who were part of your study, which is called the Good Judgment Project. Can you talk a little bit about where you recruited these people from, and then also how these tournaments actually took place? Like, what exactly were they called on to do, and how did they do?
Well, we were very opportunistic. We recruited forecasters by advertising through professional societies, by advertising through blogs. A number of high-profile bloggers helped us to recruit forecasters. People like Tyler Cowen, Nate Silver, various people were helpful in recruiting forecasters. Plus, we knew quite a few people from the earlier work that I'd done on expert political judgment. So we were able to gather initially a group of several thousand, and we were able to build on that in subsequent years. The questions, You have to be careful about making big generalizations about how good or bad people are as forecasters. 'Cause as I mentioned before, you can make people look really bad if you want to. You can pose just intractably difficult questions.
Right, because that's a big part of it too.
Or you can make people look really good. You can pose questions that aren't all that hard. And so you want to be wary of research that does cherry picking. And there are some aspects of that in some of the literature. What we were looking for was a process of generating questions that wasn't rigged one way or the other. And the method we came up with was generating questions through the U.S. intelligence community. There were questions that people inside the U.S. intelligence community felt would be of national security interest and relevance, and reasonably representative of the types of tasks that intelligence analysts are asked to do. So these were questions, typically they ask people to see out into the future several months, occasionally a bit longer, occasionally shorter. And we scored the accuracy of their judgments over time. We didn't have people make judgments one way or the other. It wasn't yes or no. We had people make judgments on what's called a probability scale, ranging from 0 to 1. And we carefully computed accuracy over time. We identified some people who are really good at it. We called them super forecasters, and they were later assembled into super teams of super forecasters. And they dominated the tournament essentially over the next 4 years. But we did a number of other experiments as well, looking for techniques that could be used to improve accuracy, and we found some.